Yes, definitely, and I'm very ready for this conversation. And I want to start with obviously the expected questions. Whatever happened in Nairobi? What happened to your comrade Kizza Besigye? How did he end up in this situation? Can you shed some more light on it? Do you have an angle on Kizza Bessigye's abduction and transfer to Uganda from Nairobi, and then now charging him in military court-martial? And what is going on? Tell us.
Well, it's unfortunate what has happened to Dr. Kizza Besigye. There are still a number of unknowns. What is most intriguing to me, though, is the manner in which the action was conducted. And it's intriguing in the sense that Dr. Kizza Besigye had not run away from the country. He often goes out of the country and comes back. And he went through the airport. I believe those who cleared him through the airport also knew that he had no intentions of remaining in Nairobi. So first, whatever the allegations they may have, to deal with one of the issues that is intriguing is why they never waited for him to get back to Uganda. To me, that's what is quite intriguing. Because when you are gathering evidence about a person, like in this particular case, if they had any case that they were following up with Dr. Kizza Besigye or with anybody who would be Ugandan in a foreign country, the work of the intelligence services is to gather evidence so that subsequently when you arraign that person in court, that you can prove that this person was in this location, they met whoever they met, they had intentions of conducting warfare, or if it is smuggling, or whatever case it is. You reach a point where you've got adequate evidence that when you go to court, that you're able to prove your case. What would push the intelligence services or the regime to conduct an arrest in Nairobi, considering what that means? One, that you put the very country, in this case Kenya, into a problem, because up to now they're asking questions about the Kenyan government, how a Ugandan citizen can be arrested in Nairobi by Ugandan security and brought across the border, which also eventually showed that there must have been collaboration, because there's no way you can drive a person who's been abducted in your country, pass through the two borders at the border point without clearance. What would be causing that? In my mind, I keep asking myself these questions. Two, even when you arrest a person in another country, more so like in Kenya, where there are diplomatic channels, there are legal frameworks through which extradition can be done, that you don't go through that process, that you abduct a person, you bring them into the country without going through any such measures that are in place between the two countries. That's quite intriguing to me. On the other side, you abduct a person who's not in the military. Dr. Kizza Besigye, like I am, like many of the officers who served in the forces, who got out of uniform. When you retire, you become a civilian. So you abduct a person who served in the forces, retired, is now a civilian. You abduct them outside the country, bring them into the country, and you arraign them before a military court. All these are questions that we must interrogate. The people, I keep trying to communicate a number of times whenever I get an opportunity to many of these senior officials, political as well as those in the security services, who at this particular time are in government. Keep operating from a mindset or the understanding that today they are in government, but there's going to be a time when they won't be in government. So how you conduct yourself when you're in government basically should indicate or give you the understanding that when you're outside government, the same thing could be done to you. So I simply can't understand whether those who are in government now would want to be treated the same way when they're outside government. Now, in case they don't want to be treated in the same way, if they want fairness, if they want justice, then they would be building a culture when they are still in government, so that when they leave government, that they would be sure, wherever they are, that even if you, we are all human beings, at times you can get involved in a case, but you are secure in the knowledge that the systems of justice are functioning properly, that actually justice is administered. So wherever you are, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, knowing that you are secure in the understanding that, if there are any allegations brought against you, that you're going to have a due process followed. Well, these are issues which basically cause a lot of concern. Now, Dr. Kizza Besigye is in prison, and the colleague he was with, Haji Kamuregera Rutare, when we spoke on Monday, we found them in good spirits. They have not been, put into a state of fear, which normally the regime does a number of these things to crush people's spirits. They are in good spirits. They are waiting to fight this case in court. Hopefully, this case will be moved to the civilian courts. One hopes that the lawyers will be able to fight, and based on the judgments of the Constitutional Court, that the pressures can be mounted so that this case can be taken to the civil courts. And then the lawyers can battle it out. So far, that's where we are at. I have seen, I've had a number of people on the regime side raising a number of issues. Those are issues that will be fought out in court. I've seen a number of issues brought in the past against Dr. Kizza Besigye for the last 20 years or so. Cases are brought up, and I've never seen ever in a case that has ever matured to completion. Always down the road, it just fizzles out, because when you don't have evidence, you cannot successfully prosecute anybody that you would have arrested. So we wait to see how this whole thing unfolds. And hopefully that a number of these questions that are hung out, in the air, that they will be resolved. One thing which still intrigues me, I really can't understand how even the nation of Kenya, the government of Kenya, would be manipulated by the Ugandan government for that to happen. Because the last time we heard about that, we just had a chat on Monday when we met with Dr. Kizza Besigye. We recalled a time, I think it was in 1982, thereabouts, 82, 83. That's when the late Mzee Kiria was abducted in Nairobi and brought to Uganda, crossed the border in Busia, and they took him to Ruzira, where he was until I think Kurutwa overthrew the Obote regime. And at that time, we had a number of senior leaders in Nairobi who were operating in Nairobi. And I think literally all of them had to run out of Nairobi. Like Dr. Gunda had to run out of Nairobi. Honorable Amama Mbabazi had to run out of Nairobi. The late Njuba had to run out of Nairobi because all those were in the external committee. And Honorable Rugunda, Honorable Amama Mbabazi ran to Sweden. And I think the late Honorable Njuba went to Papua New Guinea. And a few others whom I can't recall. The only people who remained in Nairobi was Honorable Chikaire, and I think Dr. Kionga. Those remained in Nairobi. The rest fled. That's quite a while back. That we can now degenerate back to that is absolutely unfortunate. And we really hope that we won't see that happening again.
Did you hear anything from any friends in Kenya? Any comments from Kenyan side?
There are a number of people in Kenya who are raising the same issues. The members of parliament, I have also seen through social media, because when he went, actually on Saturday, he had gone for a launch of the book of Martha Karua, Honorable Martha Karua. And I've seen her raising issues in regard to this case. I've seen a number of senior politicians in Kenya raising the same issue. I understand the members of parliament are raising it within parliament, because it's an issue of concern, because you see, if they don't really clear that issue, it means that basically many of the Ugandans who've been feeling secure in Nairobi are going to start getting frightened.
But is it just about being secure in Nairobi, or is it maybe a little bit about the integrity of Kenyan security forces? And I mean, how can anyone just drive there and pick someone and bring them across the border? It doesn't make sense to me. So while we need to feel secure there, the Kenyan government needs to be in charge of its territory.
Initially, I thought that I didn't know. I wasn't sure how they crossed the border. I imagined that if it was a clandestine operation, that they would have, their panya routes through which a person, someone can conduct an operation across the border. And when they reach the border, they can use routes other than the official routes, mostly when security is involved. But I was surprised when we spoke with Dr. Chizabesji on Monday to know that actually they went through the official border points. On both sides, they were never checked. I think the security services conducted liaison, and they opened the border for them on both sides. And one of the vehicle, I think the one which they had used on the other side, of course, which had Kenyan registration numbers, went back, and they were exchanged and put into another vehicle on the Ugandan side, and then they drove through. So basically that means that there was collaboration at the level of security on both sides. As up to what level on the Kenyan side, I don't know. That's up to the Kenyan government, be the one to conduct investigations and be able to give the clarity that is required.
Okay, just a quick one. Why would he all of a sudden be a person of interest? I mean, there's nothing much that's been going on his side. So why now? Why at this moment? Do you have any idea?
Right now, I don't think it is clear yet. But as time unfolds, we'll be able to know. Right now, it isn't clear as to whatever the regime is all about. It could be, I wouldn't want to speculate. I've been trying to think about the whole conduct of the operation and what has made me absolutely
Puzzled.
Puzzled, basically puzzled. Because yes, we know they do arrest many people. They have arrested Dr. Chiza many times. They have arrested Honorable Bobby Wine. They have arrested a number of people here in the country. And normally there is uproar inside as well as outside. But see, in that regard, the whole situation is about here, Uganda, and governance. That's where we all have been focused. What puzzles me is why conduct that kind of operation in Nairobi when they knew that Dr. Besigye would be coming back, considering the implications of that, at the regional level, in regard to Kenyan government itself and the Kenya as a country. Why bring complications on the other country? And two, why would Kenya itself allow itself to be sucked into that kind of situation? In a situation where the person, like in this case, Dr. Chiza Besigye, was not in exile, that he would be back. So it's quite puzzling at this point in time. We will wait and see as this issue unfolds. I believe we'll get to know much more than what we know so far, which isn't much, really.
Right. Let's wait and see. It might have been just a blunder anyway, and let's wait and see how the situation unfolds. But we are prepared to do such maneuvers, and somehow I want to take us to where we are terribly unprepared as a country, which is a couple of months ago the Chitezi, and just now the Bulambuli district, the Masugu landslides. 15 dead, over 113 people missing, unaccounted for in a landslide just last night. Why are we so unprepared to manage the people in these areas? What are we missing as a government? What are we not doing right?
Of course, it's unfortunate that so many people have been lost, because the last report I've read was that the count had reached about 19 or 20 dead, and there was unconfirmed information that there are about 100 missing. That's absolutely unfortunate. There are areas in Uganda which are prone to landslides, like the Mount Elgon area, the Mount Rwenzori area, certain parts of it, some extent the Kisoro areas. Now, ordinarily, when there is a government that cares for people, they would need to have invested significant amounts of resources in early detection mechanisms to detect areas which are prone to landslides, areas which are prone to earthquakes. Ordinarily, then, in a government that cares for the population would need to invest heavily to ensure that there are early warning systems. Two, any government that cares would need to build capacity that remains on standby for emergencies of that kind. Whether they are landslides, whether they are earthquakes, whether they are floods. Significant amounts of money are required, one, to recruit and put together a force of well-trained men and women who can respond to natural disasters. Of course, significant amounts of money will also be required to put all the necessary logistical support, equipment for mobility, like airlift capabilities, like land transport, like heavy equipment. Because like now, what you notice is that the local people are using human effort, using hose, trying to move, huge amounts of tons of earth, which has been moved through the landslide. Now, to get the depth of some of those areas which have been covered, if you find maybe 100 tons, 200 tons, maybe 1,000 tons of earth have moved from one location to another, and they have buried maybe houses in a valley, how will you use hose to get to people? That's why there will be requirement for heavy equipment, earth-moving equipment. And therefore, that kind of unit would be equipped with all that. So then the event that is any such catastrophe, that unit would be moved to that location. And then it is able to respond. Airlift capabilities like helicopters, ambulances, air ambulances, to move people who would be recovered, those who would be injured, to move them to areas for first aid. There need to be regional centers for such. And then people whose state or situation is bad, they would also need to have referral hospitals, if they were well equipped, that is. The problem is that when you find systems which are broken down like we have in the healthcare system for people on the day-to-day basis, it clearly points to the fact that if people who need treatment on a day-to-day basis are not carefully, are not well catered for, what about when there is an emergency? So it goes back to a system where basically for quite a long time, many of the people who occupy these offices basically don't care about people, they don't care about the country. Most of them, when they're in positions of responsibility, the first care they have is for themselves. And therefore, what we see is bound to happen.
How do we change that? How, as a country,
most
can
of
we
the
change
problems
it?
we are dealing with are really governance. And that's why
Systemic.
every citizen must keep focused on how we can not only change the regime, but also keep working. Because I bump into so many people who seem to lose hope and say nothing good seems to happen in this country. There's nothing good that can ever happen by accident, as we say, and we'll keep saying. And therefore, as we deal with the trauma of all the wrong things and the unfortunate things which are happening all around us, we must not lose sight of the fact that to bail ourselves out of this kind of situation, out of the vicious cycle through which we have been for 62 years since independence, that any future which is going to be better than what we see must be prepared for. And people who get frustrated, people who lose hope, can never prepare for the future. They'll just keep wallowing in their, lamenting in the unfortunate situation they find themselves. And the tendency is when people allow themselves to be plunged into a state of frustration and hopelessness, the mind never looks into the future to prepare for a better future. And unfortunately, that's where many people have fallen. So there must be those who keep giving hope. And I hope that the many who are trying the best they can, and we salute all of them in whatever spaces they operate, that we must not lose hope, that we must keep on mobilizing people and building the hope that is necessary for those who want to shape the future to be better than what it is, to keep linking up different ways. So that in the event, inevitably, it happens, or governments change eventually, and this one will change at some point. much as we cannot put our finger to that, but we must know for sure that inevitably it will change. That the most important thing is that when it changes, that the group which would now get together or that would have gotten together to hasten the shift or the change that is necessary, but most important, that they start moving the country and putting it on the right track. We can't afford to not think about that. Whatever darkness there is all around us, we must know that, yes, there's darkness today, but light will come. And the light must be prepared for. You know, there must be those who prepare for that light to shine. Whatever equipment they need, whatever it needs to put light where there's darkness, it must be prepared for. It's not going to happen by accident. And therefore, my hope is that it's tough for us as human beings. It's tough. We all go through very tough situations. But we must know that we are not the first ones. It's in countries that have gone through worse than what we are going through. Fortunate for them, there were those who prepared amidst the times of darkness to prepare for light after the situations which they found themselves. And we've seen examples of many countries which have broken out of the vicious cycles of turbulence that they were in. And then you find the country getting on the right track. And you find in such countries, you know, where there's fairness, there's justice, there's transparency in the management of national resources, there's prosperity on the economic front at the national level, at the individual level. And you find the conducive environment within which people are able to prosper. And that's what we must keep focused on. We can't afford to lose hope in regard to that. Because we've seen it happen elsewhere. And whatever any other human being has done elsewhere, we can do. We have the same capabilities. We are no different.
You touched on governance, and I want to throw in a question about the position of the governor, Bank of Uganda, that has been vacant since 2022, January 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, that the last governor passed away. Now, how do you connect these dots? There is no governor, and then there is 60 billion shillings missing from Bank of Uganda, gone to Japan, United Kingdom, and where's the governance in that case?
You know, there are things which at times you can't even understand how to begin giving comments on them. And unfortunately, in this particular case, maybe let me address myself specifically those who support this regime, those who support General Museveni in particular. Because when we speak, there are many who say, what can those people say? They're in the opposition. You know, we have got, I've seen a case where I think 60 billion, or is it 600 billion? 60 billion. I don't recall exactly whether it's 60 or 600 billion. That has been...
only.
Come again?
Only 60 billion.
60 billion. 60 billion. Stolen from Bank of Uganda. But you see, that brings to light, many people are going to keep focused on the stealing of the money. But see, the stealing of the money also happens at a time when there is no governor Bank of Uganda. And it's not that position is vacant because there has been a transition for like 1 month or 2 months. It's over a year, if not 2. And there is a president, about 2 years. And there's a president. And the central bank is a critical institution in the management of the finances of the country. So those who are in supporting General Museveni and in the government, what I would need to understand from them, what on earth would be in the mind of a leader, in this particular case, those of you who support him, that to let such a critical institution remain without a substantive governor for 2 years. Why? How would you defend that?
Well,
How would you defend that?
what I did is I asked
Is it arrogance?
ChatGPT.
Is it arrogance on the part of the president that you think that even if you don't do whatever is necessary to be done, what can anybody do about it? What exactly is that? So what does it mean when you are a citizen? That there's a president who simply doesn't care what you think. Because when a president does that, basically it shows there is a sense of impunity, that you can do whatever you want to do. There's nothing anybody can do. So those who support General Museveni, when he does such things and you don't question him and you don't come out, because if you are coming out like those who are in parliament, in the cabinet, in the meetings of the districts for chairpersons of NRM to say, Mr. President, we know you're a president, but you have to act on this. When you don't do that, do you understand that you keep letting this country be pushed further and further onto the precipice by one human being? Because you seem not to understand that all of us as human beings are vulnerable, highly vulnerable. When you let any human being in a position of power, when they are not questioned, when they develop thinking that they can do anything and go with it, when they think there's nothing that can check them, basically you've given them a rope to hang themselves, but in the process of hanging themselves, they can hang a country. That's where the unfortunate aspect comes in. That's why all leaders need to be checked, even within the organization that they lead, starting like a party. That's why leaders need to be checked. That's why the best forms of governing is where there are checks and balances within the institutions. That's why stable governance systems, that you find the principle of separation of powers. There's a parliament, there's executive, there's a legislature. They are independent of each other, but they cooperate in the interest of the country. And there are laws that govern how they operate, how they coordinate effort in the interest of the citizenry. Because all individuals who find themselves in these positions are there by virtue of the population which pays taxes, because none of those people pays himself or herself. All of them are spending money from taxes. All of them are paid by money from taxes. And that's why citizens, therefore, are a paramount element in governance. And that's why they have to take a stand wherever they find themselves, in a party, in a district council, in parliament, wherever they are, to know that for us to have stability in a country, no leader should act with impunity. That's why we have a problem with many of the people who are in the NRM. But any leader who thinks they can do anything and go with it, that is dangerous for a country. We've seen countries which have gone down because of leaders who develop that kind of thinking, because there are no people who are questioning them, who are holding them to account. And when a country falls apart, then people start saying, oh, this or that, and then they put the blame on the feet of the individual. How can an individual cause a collapse of a country? No single individual can cause collapse of a country. There must be consent or collaboration by those who are in that country as well. More so those who would be in the systems of governance.
There are some
It's
news
unfortunate.
reports.
We're hoping that they will carry out investigations and hopefully they'll be able to recover that money. I don't know whether they'll be able to recover it or not. In any case, we have seen much more money stolen and it's never recovered. But my hope is that at this point, the issue of the governor needs to be raised. I don't know what's going on in the mind of General Museveni, but it's not right. You cannot just, because you're a president, that it is your responsibility to ensure that there is a governor, because the governor would now, in this particular case, take full responsibility. But there is a deputy. I really pity the person who is in that position, because when you're a deputy, you are acting. You can't have the full mandate. So now, do you take full responsibility? What happens? So like in the loss of this money, yes, if you're a governor, you take responsibility. But in this particular case, since there is no governor, the buck stops at the feet of General Museveni himself. He can't wriggle out of this. He has to take responsibility as well. Should not start blaming the deputy governor and whatever and whatever. There is no governor. Why? For 2 years.
So how do we take this forward? I mean, there is a notable absence of civic education in schools for decades. There is a notable separation of, how to say this, there is division on the income lines, obviously. According to the Bertelsmann Stiftung report, the BTI Transformation Index report, poverty in Uganda is at 70-some%. Automatically, you can see that the tax base is very narrow, and majority of Ugandans are not so to say, registered taxpayers. So they don't hold anyone accountable because they don't believe they pay taxes and that they should be accounted to. What do we do? How do we take this forward? How do we fight for Uganda, the just and productive and balanced, and how do we build a society?
It has been a new group that is able to do that. The group which is there is simply incapable. The main focus is survival, regime survival, nothing else. In any case, I don't think they want a population that has high levels of political consciousness, because once you have a population that has high levels of political consciousness, they'll question, they'll hold leaders to account. And yet these leaders currently running the regime don't want to be held accountable. I mean, the issue of lack of civic education, which would need to be conducted on a full-time basis, is deliberate. The lack of it is deliberate. Because how would any organ, like in this particular case, the Electoral Commission in itself, which is, compromised, but even if it wasn't compromised, how would they conduct civic education unless they have funds? Funds would have deliberately be budgeted for civic education to be conducted. And therefore, it is the private citizens through different channels who will have to keep doing that. My hope is that like the faith organizations, the churches, the mosques would need to continue doing that, not on a partisan basis, but issues of governance, which are not, they don't have to say we support this party or that party, but they need to keep on raising the consciousness of the population on issues of governance. For example, on the question of that any citizen has got the right to hold leaders to account because they pay taxes. That's what gives the citizen that authority and the mandate, because they pay, and therefore those who work on their behalf needs to be questioned. And it won't happen under this regime. Hopefully, the group that goes in next will be better equipped in terms of understanding and knowledge, even in terms of commitments, in terms of the depth of political consciousness across the leadership of any group that goes into power, so that they can start building the country on a totally new direction. Currently, when you see all the things that happen, they desire to have it this way. I mean, if you do things that people are not questioning. Because like in this particular case, it's parliament that would be holding government to account. It's parliament, regardless of another confusing thing is that people who are like in the ruling party seem not to understand that even when you're in the ruling party, that you don't have to blindly support everything. There are things, I mean, like the case we just talked about of lack of a governor is not a partisan issue. So even when they're in the majority, those who are in RM, actually they're the ones who would be on the forefront, using their majority to say, Mr. President, you need to act on this or that, whatever the issue may be. But we have got members of parliament really who, because of the nature of our politics, and I think also the nature of the levels of consciousness of our population, the members, most of the members of parliament leave a lot to be desired. And that's another, I think, issue that we need to tackle as a citizenry. We are reaping what we sow. Because when you send anybody to parliament whom we clearly know doesn't even understand the first thing to do in parliament, what would people expect? We're reaping the fruits of what we've been sowing for a while. Yes, Nada?
What's the way forward with Alliance for National Transformation? What do you have in mind? What programs have you developed to broaden the party membership, first of all, and then to instill some civic education programs into place?
Yeah, we're engaged in a very laborious process. Slow, but systematic, of trying to attract men and women from the citizenry who understand that a better future must be prepared for, and that it requires men and women who are committed to it, and also who have high levels of resilience, knowing that we operate in a conditions, political environment in which we have got people in the regime who simply don't care about anybody, who don't care about people, they don't care about the country. And therefore, to know that to build a new leadership and keep on communicating with the population until a point, because two things that will happen. One, whether we we want or not, whether those in government want or not, change is a constant. And when a regime keeps making mistakes and people keep getting frustrated, there is always a point, a turning point, when the dynamics of change build their own life. And then change happens. What we have to do is to ensure that as the natural dynamics of change keep building because of the mistakes the regime keeps making, that simultaneously, those who want to shape the future must keep on acting in terms of organizing, reaching out, building a significant number of leaders, so that the two go together, so that at the point when change happens, that any group which takes power has got the capabilities to start building that better future that we all desire, that we all hope for, that we are all crying for, but we must organize for it. When we communicate with a number of colleagues who are in the opposition, that's what we keep on constantly communicating to the other colleagues. That's what we are doing in Alliance for National Transformation. People seem not to understand that. Some seem not to understand that, which is absolutely unfortunate, that people hope to get a better future by accident. Well, it's something which absolutely flusters me. I don't see how anybody can expect something good that is not prepared for or organized for. However, much as people may not understand us, we don't give up because we know that's the only thing that is between us and disaster for another period. So we have to keep focusing on that. With all our lives and thoughts and minds and resources, time and whatever capabilities we have, we apply that and keep working on it until we achieve it, because we don't see any other alternative anyway.
How is the building of the membership progressing?
It's quite
I'm
slow.
giving you
It's slow
I'm
because
giving you a chance to do a commercial break.
it's been slow because of resources. Because unfortunately, we are not a party that has got a member of parliament yet. And only parties which have members of parliament are the ones which get resources from the consolidated fund. We don't have a member of parliament yet. And therefore, all our plans are driven according to whatever resources we get. We have not been able to mobilize the resources. One, there are people who seem not to understand what we're talking about. The few who understand it, and we thank them, are the ones who keep putting in bits of resources, and the cumulative effect of which enables us to go the areas so far which we've gone to. Our desire, of course, would have been to cover this whole country by mid next year. And we are people who are, who walk, with hope, whatever darkness there might be all around. And therefore, we'll keep on doing what we have to do within the means that we have until we reach where we desire to be. One thing we can't do is giving up. That's absolutely no option in regard to the way we look at things. Because we deserve much better than we see. We have got a country that is one of the most beautiful on this planet, with all nature of blessings that are God-given. And then you see a bunch of people who don't care about the country, just messing up all that. So we know that the team, if it is focused, disciplined, and is able to get into power, that the resources at the disposal of any government in this country are adequate for a country to be put right, to be turned around, to be driven in the correct direction in a very, very short period of time. And that's why we keep hopeful and not, we don't allow ourselves to be desperate. We don't allow ourselves to be frustrated. Those leaders never get frustrated. We just have to keep doing all things that are necessary to be done. And one thing that we're also sure of, that is when you are pursuing truth, when you have convictions in what you are pursuing, when you don't give up, when you have resilience and you keep at it over and over, eventually you always reach a point of breakthrough. And that's one thing we are sure of. We can't put our finger exactly when that will be, but one thing we know for sure, that we will succeed in what we are doing, by God's grace.
I have a question that's been running in my head for a while, and that is, first of all, Uganda had lost some territory to Kenya, and then some colonizer with a ruler and a pen kind of sketched some boundaries and said, this is Uganda, and encased in that territory so many different tribes, 56 main languages spoken. So there is such diversity in the country. Have you managed to pinpoint that one thing that unites all of us as Ugandans? What is it?
A desire to have a good life, a desire to see a better environment in which we all can be equal before the law, in which we can all access equal opportunities, in which there can be fairness, in which there can be justice. That desire, I think, is what gives hope. And therefore, the experience we have had where we hang around each other in spite of all the visitation of atrocities we've committed against each other as a people, as within the country. If it wasn't for that desire from which hope emanates, that enables us to hang around each other, believing that we are going to reach that point when what we desire will happen, maybe we would have simply fallen apart as a country. Every time we get sucked into even violence, we recover from that. And then we start trying to rebuild again. Unfortunately, we again lose direction. 62 years rotating in a vicious cycle. That's absolutely unfortunate. But you still sense that desire and the hope for a better future. And therefore, it's amazing how even that happens. But it is there. You can touch it, you can feel it. That people have hope that there'll be a better future. What frightens me at times is for people to have that hope, but not to work to translate it into reality. Because we have an undesired reality. What we are living in now is an undesired reality. But you see, to move from an undesired reality to a new reality that is desirable because of what you experience within that new reality, you must create that new reality. It cannot happen by itself. It can't. So that's where my hope is, that amidst all these situations that we go through, that those who understand that we have to have the people who have gone through all nature of problems, social, political, economic, but still have that hope and the desire for a better future, that they link up through different channels and keep working for that better future, which is possible, which I believe we will be able to achieve at some point. And also as a building block, because today, I think yesterday and today, and it seems tomorrow, I understand the 7 leaders or 8 of the East African countries are in Arusha trying to work for the East African community integration process. My hope is that even as we work to resolve our own internal contradictions, that those who have hope for a better future also become building blocks, as hopefully even in other countries that there are also people who are doing the same thing, so that when we resolve our domestic problems and other countries also resolving their domestic problems, that we can have a meaningful integration process. This region is an economic powerhouse. The potential is so deep, it's so wide, it is so, you simply can't understand how we can live in this kind of environment with all that you see in this region,
So would you say it's up to maybe young people, young leaders, to take charge and to lead within their immediate environment, not aiming big, but aiming to lead and change lives immediately around them? Would that take us to that better future that we all desire?
All honest men and women, all men and women in this country who believe in integrity, who believe in transparency, who believe in honesty, who believe in establishing an environment in which there will be equal opportunities, who don't just talk about it, who believe in it. That can only be the most successful way out of this mess. Across age groups, across ethnic groupings, across religious groupings. Because that's the line of, that needs to be, that must be the line of separation. Again, that's an area where we seem not to be focusing a lot because when you see all that is happening, you almost get to a point where you start thinking that there are no honest men and women in this country, which is false. They are there, there are many. But that has not yet been made the primary line of focus. So you find it is easier for people to mobilize around all other considerations. That hasn't yet become the focal point. And yet, it must be if this country is going to be better than what it is. Because even the young people, naturally, they are the ones who are going to keep generation after generation. A generation takes over from another generation. That's a natural process. But the question, whichever generation now comes, what's going to be the balance of forces in favor of within that generation? Well, the generations we've so far had, and across the different generations that live at a particular given point in time, so far, from 1962 until now, the balance of forces has been in favor of those who are more focused on self-interest than national interest. Those who are driven by self-aggrandizement rather than the good of community, the good of the citizenry. There's no debate about that because evidence is clear. Because if we've ever had at any point in time in the past, or even now, the balance of forces was in favor of people who care about others, who care about the country, and they were in a majority, so that out of every 10 leaders, 7, 8 are of that nature. The evidence would be self-evident. Would be having transparent management of national resources, would be having equal opportunities, would be having justice, would be having fairness, would be seeing national development, would be seeing resources focused on the areas which are critical for development of a country, in education, in health, in infrastructure. When you don't get that happening, it basically means that the balance of forces is in favor of people who are driven by self-interest. And they're all over the place. They're in every ethnic group, they're in every religious group, they're in every, across all generations, as we speak now. Look at the regime. Right from those who, of course, held offices, I think they start at around 18. I don't think we have anybody at 18 yet, maybe, but there are those in their 20s. Up to those who are in their 90s, all of them on a gravy train, looting as if there is no tomorrow. They are across all age groups, they are across all religious groups, they are across all ethnic groups. A counterforce has to be built which is also across all age groups, across all ethnic groups, across all religious groups, but whose character is different, whose focus is different, whose commitments are different, who can walk the talk. That's the only way you can counterbalance this situation. Organize around that, overwhelm the current undesirable situation, and then create a new reality that you desire to see happen, that you desire to see established. That's the only solution out of this mess.
So, my pretty much last question is touching on freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. A couple of months ago, again, we saw people arrested for preparing to stage a demonstration. We arresting people in a car park while they are writing placards. How bad is it really, in your opinion, the freedom of expression and the freedom of assembly in Uganda?
Yeah, what's happening here is nothing new. When you look even on at the global scale, over from history, what we've noticed is that all autocratic regimes fear people. And the one thing that they all invest in is managing public perceptions. And to manage public perceptions, you must control communications. They fear. All autocratic regimes fear people. And therefore, they know that if you let the airways free, if there is a freedom of communication, people will communicate. And when people communicate, it is one of the central tools of organization. And you know that when people are able to organize, and therefore they effectively use that tool of communication, they can build a potent force that can overwhelm you, throw you out of power. So naturally, what they do is to ensure that they clamp down on communication. And therefore, to manage public perceptions, they also invest heavily. All regimes, all autocratic regimes, you find them, they invest heavily in expertise, technical people who've done human psychology, marketing, people who know how to shape public opinion, what kind of propaganda to push. And eventually you create a narrative that is suitable to you who is controlling people. Because when you influence public thinking, but simultaneously cause people to fear, to speak, then you don't have to deploy a lot of human resources in terms of the security services. People police themselves. One section of society are policed by fear. Another section of society that is gullible to propaganda simply are fed into a narrative, and they simply lay back and think things are okay. And those who are fighting for selfish interests, or they had a quarrel with this one or that one. So, and when a population is thrown into that kind of situation, then the autocrats sit back and they relax. Communication is one of the most effective tools in the process of liberation. One thing, though, that is, I think, of an advantage in this particular case, they can't shut down, more so like Uganda, which is doesn't have the technical capabilities, for example, to fully shut down the internet or to shut down the social media communication channels. There is a time when all autocratic regimes used to control radio. You have only one radio in a country, and everybody listens to that radio. And therefore, you can easily influence opinion. But now there are many radios, there are many TVs, there are many social media programs. So what has to happen is that there must be also people who are focused on how to create counter narratives to undermine the narrative that the regime would be pushing, as a way of ensuring that people don't get trapped in the propaganda of the regime, to keep bring out truth. Because there's nothing that beats falsehoods can never beat truth. Eventually, truth triumphs. But for truth to triumph, it must be spoken. It must be communicated consistently, persistently. And over a period of time, it creates the necessary momentum to overwhelm the falsehoods that the regime would have been using. We've seen countries collapse, those that had survived on propaganda. So there is nothing new in that regard. And therefore, those of us who want to see change must keep on investing heavily in that, in terms of time, in terms of resources. We thank those who are investing time and resources in that regard, but therefore, all of us must keep on doing the same thing.
How do we eliminate that fear? How do we stop the fear?
And the only way you can overcome fear is, again, communication, talking to people, because in a form of training, it's not possible to bring like all Ugandans and take them through boot camp of the military and train them. But let me use the example of the military. I keep using it a number of times when I'm talking to people who are trapped in fear. before people go into the military, the tendency is that when there are gunshots close to where people are, the tendency is that people who are not trained will run because of fear. It's a natural reaction. The example I normally give is that, but look at the civilians who are recruited, taken into the army, trained for 6 months, and when they get out, same human being who 6 months back would have run away. But now he's trained, and when there's fire, they don't run away. And a number of times they advance towards fire because they are trained. Same human being. Same thing with fear. We have to keep talking, showing examples of other countries where changes have happened. There are more people who are dying of natural death in hospitals than even those who are dying for political causes. People need to understand, because at times some of these facts can maybe hopefully help people who want to overcome fear, that we will all die anyway. But that too, there is choice. What kind of situation do you want to live in? You pay taxes. Someone is abusing your taxes, and he wants you to keep quiet. At what point have you reached? Have you reached a point where you say, you know what? I am fed up. When you reach a point of saying, I cannot pay my taxes and live as a slave, then definitely you overcome fear. 2, does that mean that when you overcome fear, for example, you go get weapons and fight? No. Does it mean that you necessarily go on the streets to demonstrate? Not necessarily. Depends on how you are wired. Because again, human beings, we are wired different. We have got different inclinations. There are those who are inclined to get weapons and fight, like some of us did. There are those who are inclined to go on the streets and demonstrate. Those who are inclined that way normally do that. But many people don't know that there are also many other ways in which you can be defiant without necessarily engaging in a fight, because the defiance starts from the mind. When you say, no, I cannot pay my taxes, you steal my money, I've just lost a relative in a hospital because of the money which was stolen. No, I can't take it anymore. And therefore, let me go and operate within this space. I may not go on the street, I may not go get weapons, but I must do all things that are necessary to ensure that this regime is removed, whichever the regime it would be. That's also another way of struggle. So we must keep communicating so that people don't think that, oh, because people say, if I go on the streets, I can die. Okay, if you're inclined that way, you don't go there, but you do something else. You don't sit back and say, we will wait for something to happen miraculously. No, that's not how life is. Since creation, all human beings, there are those who have gone through worse situations than we've gone through in the past. But all societies which have developed levels where they are comfortable all had to go through testing periods. And within those communities, there were people who would say enough is enough, and therefore develop the resilience. They make coordination, and they operate on the fronts on which they're inclined to operate. Those who believe in civil disobedience, they go in there. Those who believe in, for example, creating an organization that prepares itself to take power, keep on building, they do that. All that is legitimate. All that is what is necessary to be done. What you don't do is to sit back, allow yourself to be plunged into a state of frustration and hopelessness, and the only thing left for you is to lament from morning to evening, one day, a week, 1 month, 1 year. It does not help at all. We need to get out of that. Once you get out of that, there are always avenues. I mean, people who operate on different levels can start organizing. But organize, there must be people who are ready to say, okay, I am tired, enough is enough, let's go in that direction, and I feel inclined I can do that.
Would you like to see more young people trying to win seats in the parliament in the next election?
I hope there will be young people who will be going to parliament to try to change this environment, but not simply to go there to just, like many of them are there now, 500 and something out of those. You cannot get even 150 who are there because they care about the country or care about the people. My hope is that there's going to be a shift in that regard as well. I mean, I talked to quite a number of people. The last time when we were going to elections, I bumped into quite a number of young people, a number of them professionals. Some were medical doctors, others lawyers, others different. And I was telling them, you know what? It would be good for the country that you, at your age and with the professional backgrounds that you have, that you can engage in politics. And that therefore there is an opportunity for a shift in terms of the direction the country needs to take. Unfortunately, many of them were saying they cannot go into opposition parties because if they go in opposition parties, they're going to be fought and they'll lose positions. And that the only way they can go to parliament is by going into the NRM. And that's where I would know that, you know, we really have a problem in this country. All those who went, even those who went through, when you track, none has even lived up to the expectations of what you would expect for young people. At 23, some of us went, held weapons, fought, shot, went back, kept on fighting until we took power. Then a number of colleagues who got overwhelmed by the nature of power lost direction. And the others who are still on the front lines fighting. So when you are fighting for what is right, you cannot go to hide in something because that's where you think you're going to go through. Do what you believe to be the right thing, whether you're going to lose or win. That's not the consideration, winning. It is the organizing. Stand by what you believe. Otherwise, why would people go to the war front to fight, even those who go into armies to fight for their countries? Because they know they could die. If everybody say that, you know what, I cannot join the army because I could die. Death is worse than losing a parliamentary seat. You lose it now, you try another time. The guy who's on the front, who is shot, protecting you, is not going to resurrect. They are going to bury them. And you're talking about winning an election, but you go in something you don't believe in. That's what they keep saying. They don't believe in that, but they join it. What kind of institutions do you go through that do not shape your thinking? And therefore, Nada, my hope is that we'll have young men and women who are really ready to do what is right, believing that eventually they will succeed. Even when seemingly they are operating, all odds are against them. They are swimming against the tide. But to know that we will fight until we achieve what we desire to achieve. Don't hide in what you don't believe in.
That is quite a strong thought right there. But I wanted to finish with that. However, there is a question from the audience, and people are asking that we still have the massive killings of people by unauthorized rifle holders. How would it be solved? So this is something about the gun laws and unauthorized, unlicensed guns in the society.
Question. Sorry.
That we still have the massive killings of people by unauthorized rifle holders. How would this be solved?
Strengthening the security services. the investigative services, for example, like CID, when you look at the kind of budget the CID has, clearly shows you that this regime really doesn't focus a lot in that regard. Because people who commit crimes, whether using unlicensed guns or even those who are using officially held guns, people fear to go to prisons. And mostly criminals know when there is a robust system of investigations, where they know that when you commit a crime, you will be found out, that there are professional investigative institutions that will investigate, that you'll be tried in the courts of law, that the connection between investigative offices like CID, like prosecutions, like the court systems are so well prepared with very well trained, very well motivated men and women, that anybody who commits a crime will be successfully prosecuted, and they'll be sentenced and they'll serve sentence. When people know that you cannot commit a crime and go away with it, that reduces the levels of crimes. Now we don't have that, unfortunately. Two, later on, even finding out who the criminals are, because there are many murders which take place and they never get the criminals who have committed that. Again, it requires spending of resources in the police services and intelligence services. But again, when you have a regime which cares more about political survival than anything else, I'm not surprised that. Actually, what surprised me is that the levels of crime are not as high as would normally happen. When you see like the levels of budget into CID, they're quite low, with staff which is not motivated at all. So again, one hopes that we'll have a team of, a group of men and women who would go in after this regime is out, which is inevitable, that can turn around this situation, invest the necessary resources in the security services like CID, like the police itself, to ensure that they put in place a secure environment in which citizens can enjoy themselves in whatever area of endeavor they are in.
There is another question from from our listeners, and it is, do you agree in principle with Dr. Besigye on principle that an election cannot remove His Excellency Museveni out of power?
No, we have never shared that view. We've never agreed on that. Or throughout. I've always believed that you can overwhelm this regime if you are well organized at the grassroots level. Unfortunately, there are many colleagues who think that can't work. And my advice has always been, okay, let's just not have any misunderstanding around that. Let every group organize around what it feels inclined to organize around. Let's not quarrel amongst each other, because whatever is to work will work. Whatever isn't to work won't work. So why would we have to quarrel? So for me, as long as every group that is involved in this struggle, because literally all methods are legitimate and they're also lawful, that whoever wants to organize around civil disobedience, that they organize around that. But those who want to build the grassroots structures, like that's where we are focused, not only for now, in terms of hastening the removal of the regime, but also to prepare on governance. Because you see, organizing to remove a regime needs to be conducted simultaneously with how to manage power. Because removing a regime does not necessarily mean that you will manage power effectively. No. I mean, you can take power and you mismanage it, like we have seen for the last 62 years. Excuse me. So why we concentrate on what we do is that we think that organizing a party, in this case, right from grassroots up the national level, has two advantages. One, that you are building long term, but that you can also, if you organize effectively in all parts of the country, like we have seen at some point we had in the north, Gulu, the Acholi area, West Nile area, Teso area, at that time as FDC, which was the largest opposition party. We had a significant number of those who were the strongholds of the opposition then, and eventually Kasese came on board. Now, what many people don't seem to understand is when Buganda shifted and Busoga, because Busoga shifted at the presidential level, unfortunately, because Honorable Bobby Wine beat General Museveni in Busoga, clearly, and in Buganda. Because even the official results indicate that at the presidential level. The unfortunate thing is in Busoga, below the presidential, literally the NRM swept Busoga. That's a contradiction. That's a contradiction. It's a contradiction, but that's not the point we are talking about. The point we are talking about is, suppose we had consolidated the areas where we were as opposition, West Nile, Acholi, Teso, Kasese, and at that time even Rukunjiri. And then Buganda shifts, Busoga shifts at the same time. We've consolidated, we have added on more territory. Why would anybody think that you cannot overwhelm the regime in that regard? You hear people say, the regime is the one which allows that. Really, do you think people think that Buganda didn't shift? Buganda shifted. You could see on the ground, people said enough is enough, as we had seen in Acholi land, in West Nile, and in Teso. But we have to do work at the same time. Because, like in the military, when you want to capture territory, you consolidate what you've captured, then you keep fighting, you add on. Consolidate, add on, until you take the whole country or whatever area you intended to capture. Similarly, in politics, you organize, you consolidate, and you keep on advancing in new areas, fighting to take over. Two, why we think that you can overwhelm this regime. Again, where we have a difference of opinion with a number of other opposition actors. We concentrate a lot on the top, because many of the leaders say, no, capture the presidency, and then you'll have captured the country. Our view has always been, yes, that could work. So if you feel that's the strategy, work on that. For us, our strategy has always been, capture the grassroots, and when you capture the grassroots, it will also enable you to capture parliament and the presidency. And the analogy we use is that if you cut the roots of a tree, even the largest tree that anybody has ever seen, you cut those roots, that tree will come down. The example we normally use, sorry, we've taken a significant time. We have 2,000 sub-counties in this country. There is no time when we've ever, as opposition, held more than 300 sub-counties. And we keep asking people, imagine out of 2,000 counties, even when you go by the presidential elections, even when they are manipulated, because even when they were manipulated, at some point, Dr. Chiza got around 40%. Last time, Honorable Bobby Wine also got about 40%. So when you translate 40% of that to 2,000, you'll get about 800 sub-counties. So you can imagine, if you are well organized as an opposition, Even when you are cheated at the presidential, but you have captured 40% of LC3s, 40% of LC5, because when it comes to districts 147, 40% of that would be around 60 something. If you have 60 something LC5s and 800 or 900 LC3s, and you consolidate time and effort and work with them in those areas and consolidate those areas by training your leaders, by propagating your agenda, and people understand you, and they see better governance in the areas that you control, that gives you the momentum. Next round, you can overwhelm the regime. Unfortunately, we never concentrated on that. People say that will take a long time, but we have spent quite a while. I think we've been in the opposition for close to 20 years plus. I mean, if we've not tried what we keep saying. We've never put effort onto it. Nevertheless, some of us cannot divert from that because we understand the dynamics in it. So we'll keep working on it until a time when it succeeds. But two, as we work on it, as we organize, have a vehicle which you know that the moment we take power, whether singularly or as part of a united group, that you know that you have got a group which is focused, disciplined, understand the dynamics of power, is focusing on deliberately, consciously, intentionally wanting to use power for the good of the country. That has to happen. And the only way it can happen is you must build it. You must keep building that. However, I fully support our colleagues who are inclined differently, who organize differently. I have never attacked them. I never undermine them because I know that the routes they have chosen to take or they normally choose to take, one, are legitimate. They're also lawful. So I have no problem with that. As long as you don't quarrel amongst each other and each group organizes the manner in which, in the ways it thinks it's the right way to go, I see no problem. We can actually complement each other. Because whatever we do, wherever we do it, weakens the regime. And every time the regime is weakened, it is to our advantage. But we must take advantage of that and keep organizing.
Now, I'd like us to wrap up, but there is one question that came in, and I feel it's quite interesting and good to end with it. The gentleman is asking you to give a word of wisdom to the members of our security forces. And with that, we can conclude tonight's session. Thank you.
Well, the members of security forces need to understand the kind of burden they are carrying, individually and collectively. Because whether anybody wants to believe it or not, security services are at the core of the stability of any country. So my hope is that they'll have the courage, one, to know that, but also to have the boldness to act in a manner that is necessary in managing a transition. We have seen, we saw close to Kenya where we saw the time when there was going to be transition between the late President Moi and when the late President Kibaki came in. The security services played a very, very significant and critical role in that transition process. Many people may not be aware of it, but that's a fact. Because they knew that Kenya will be there long after Moi dies, which is now clearly the case. Kenya is there. As Uganda will be there when General Museveni passes on, when I pass on, when everybody passes on, all of us who are here are going to die. in this. The generation will pass on, another generation will come, but the country remains. Hopefully, the only time when Uganda will change shape is in its expansion. If it's the will of God, and there is a time when all the 6 or 7 or 8 countries agree to come together and become a political federation, which means that all the countries that federate would have changed shape, but for the better. The worst thing is for a country to change shape by diminishing, becoming smaller. That is, if there is internal fights and the country disintegrates, like we've seen happen in Sudan. We pray that that never happens. So the security services therefore need to know that the manner in which they think, one, to know that there's a point when General Museveni will cease to be the president of this country. That's a given. It's inevitable. Whatever anybody wishes or doesn't wish, that's inevitable. And therefore to know that their lives don't stop with the exit of General Museveni. Their lives will be there. They have got children. They have got grandchildren. I believe they want a better future for them. And therefore, in their minds, to know that, you know what, we cannot pin our destiny on, and the destiny of a country, on the destiny of one human being. That the country is larger than any human being, whether it is General Museveni, whether it is Muntu, whoever it is. And therefore, work in having the thinking, the culture, the infrastructure that necessarily serves that thought, that understanding, that belief. They have to work on that. Not to work on that is like ostriches which put their heads in the sand when they see an enemy, and then they think that the enemy is not seeing them. I wouldn't even understand how people in security services, I normally used to communicate to soldiers who would fear to talk to their senior commanders. You know, in the field, you'd go there and you find that there are mismanagement at times of resources. And I ask them, why are you not able to speak? Tell the commander that he is wrong. And then you find that they fear, you know, that they may not be favored in terms of promotion or this or that. But you ask them, you go to the front, because all these officers and men, the majority of them are bold, they are courageous, they fight. They see their colleagues die, they take them back, they bury them, others are wounded, but they go back and fight. And you ask them, if you don't fear death, why on earth should you fear another person that because they have got a higher rank than you have? Why? You don't fear death, but you fear someone because he's senior in rank. Why? Why? So the leaders need to understand that, those who are in the security services, that the country is more important. And they have courage, because they go on the fronts, we know they have courage. We don't doubt their courage. But that they must work for a better country. Not to do that is that they are just simply abdicating their responsibility.
General, I thank you so much for tonight. I want to underline one sentence, and that is that everyone has a duty to work for a better country. With these words, I thank you. Your parting words for tonight?
Thanks a lot, Nada, for hosting me again, accepting to host me. Thank you, and giving me this opportunity to communicate on this platform, and to thank all who have spared time to engage in this conversation. We apologize for starting a little bit late because of some technological hiccups. And we hope that we'll keep on interacting on different platforms in different spaces. And we'll keep on coordinating effort to see how we can shape a better future for our country. May the good Lord richly bless you all.
Our dear listeners, that was all from General Mugisha Muntu for tonight. And I am Nada Andersen, the host of tonight's session. See you next time, and God bless you all. Take care. Good night.